Minimalism is a style of artwork that I really enjoy using with my paintings, and today I thought I would talk about some of the reasons why the minimalist style is so effective. In the last 10 years or so, I have noticed that being minimalist has become a very popular trend across the internet, and as far as artwork goes, it is also carried on in that sort of popularity. So, today I thought I would talk a little bit about why minimalism is such an effective tool when it comes to artwork while we actually watch me create a minimalist style painting. The first most obvious point when it comes to why minimalism is so effective is the simplicity. Minimalist style artwork often has a very small amount of elements. It's very simple in the amount of shapes it has, maybe the amount of lines or colors. All of these things can be used to really dial back the amount of information and make it very easy to understand, but also very visually pleasing at the same time. The way I'm approaching this painting is by keeping it down to just the one single figure in the center of the panel. The other way that I'm keeping this portrait fairly simple is by using very straightforward colors. I have a lot of white that's going to end up being around the perimeter of this portrait. And the colors of the portrait, even though they're not the usual skin tones, they're very simple in the fact that they are analogous in nature. They are mostly green, veering into some yellows. But the simplicity of the colors and the figure are what makes this an extremely minimalist style. I find that approaching work like this is very satisfying because it takes a little bit less time to complete a painting. You can use it as a way of creating studies. It's a very effective tool when you want to get an idea across or get a concept across to a viewer. Another point I'd like to make about approaching work in a minimalist style is all of that negative space allows you to get really aggressive with the subject that you have within that negative space. So for instance, this painting is very calm around the borders. There's a moment of silence, I guess you could say, but that allows you to put a lot of impact into the subject in the middle. You can play with textures and raw brush strokes way more than if you covered the entire panel with a bunch of brush strokes. It almost loses its impact because you don't have any of that clean, minimalist space around the subject. A great perk to creating work in this way also is that it has a very universal appeal. Using Instagram as a way to kind of get a gauge on what people's responses are to my work, I can sometimes put the most simplistic, minimalist style painting of a portrait, just like the one we're working on today, and post that on Instagram, and then do a different one the next day where I put a bunch more effort into it. There's a lot more happening around the subject. And it almost never fails that the more minimalist style portrait has a better response from my viewers. Minimalism also gives the viewer a chance to really focus on the method that the artist used to create the artwork. So this could be a focus on things like the materials, or it could be on the process itself, or maybe just the use of very beautiful brushstrokes, how the impressionism comes through, or the expressionism, or the abstraction. All these things could really be honed in on by the viewer. The artwork that I'm creating right now, at this point, I am just focusing on getting the shapes and the colors into place. But I know later on down the road with this painting towards the end, I'm going to start focusing more on brush strokes and expressionism so that those really come out and really provoke the viewer to come up with their own connection to what the artwork is saying in a very digestible way. Personally, I think that doing a minimalist style painting can also have a very emotional impact when you think about the subject being isolated from its surrounding world and all you see is just that face floating in the middle as if there's no one else around. The subject is by themselves. That creates an emotional connection to a viewer because we all feel alone at some point in our lives. So when it comes to portrait paintings, that connection we all have, it's something we can all relate to, that feeling of isolation, of being alone, and wanting that connection with other people. Minimalism also has a timelessness to it. So if you look back to different eras, paintings that have a minimalist feel to them have a quality that is inherently able to keep up with modern times. My hope is that 100 years from now, when I'm long gone, maybe my paintings will still hold up. People will still be enjoying them in their homes. And that's something that is worth considering when you're creating your work. If you want to create something that is more timeless, that doesn't have a motif to it that maybe just feels dated decades later, you may want to consider exploring this style. And finally, I think there's a couple last points I'd want to make about this particular minimalist style, and that is just a simple fact that it reduces the clutter. I think our world is filled with a lot of visual stimulus, and when you want to have a chance to slow down, there's no better way than looking at something that is visually a little cleaner. And that's what this painting is all about, is having a very clean approach that allows you to dive a little deeper with minimal amounts of effort. And finally, I think the most basic reason why I love minimalism, and it's something that some artists should consider, is that it's simply appealing aesthetically. The clean lines, the balanced compositions, the harmonious color palettes, all of these ideas are associated with this particular style. So what am I trying to accomplish with this painting? What am I trying to emphasize with this minimalist style in this painting? Well, I'd say for starters, the first thing is I'm trying to show a lot of visual appeal using edge control, brush strokes, a lot of expressionism. All of these things are starting to finally come around at this point with this painting. I'm just trying to throw in a little abstraction around the mouth area just to see where it can go. But if I was to do this too far, if I was to take this to the very boundaries of the panel's surface, I would have lost that focus on those things I just mentioned. Now, does that mean that every painting you do has to have this minimalist feel to it? Absolutely not. I tend to gravitate towards a lot of different minimalist levels. This one happens to be as minimalist as I could probably ever go, but there are ways to add more color, add more texture around the perimeter, and still have a balance of negative space and emotional impact without having to just have a white background or a black background every time. So with all that being said, I'm starting to get to the end of this painting where I'm just starting to throw in some final abstraction and some expressionist style brushstrokes. While we're here, I thought I would just quickly mention that this particular video has a full-length, at least hour-and-a-half tutorial that you can watch over on my Patreon page if you want to hear me talk through the whole thing and explain my approach in detail. Feel free to also put a comment below. I will make sure to respond to any questions or comments that you have. And if you want to see my day-to-day works or what I'm working on currently, go over to my Instagram page where you will see something every day posted. I've been really good about doing that lately. Thank you so much for watching another one of my videos. I really do appreciate it, and I will talk to you again next week.